What the Hex, your source for Warhammer Underworlds in under 30 swag counters. Today I'm your host Phil, and with me as always is my second mate, Davy. How you doing, Davy?
I'm doing good. Who's your first mate?
First mate, I think right now Shriek's looking like a pretty great first mate there on the shoulder.
All right.
But maybe Mange. I mean, he's really
Yeah.
he's really threatening with that knife. I don't know if I necessarily want to piss him off too much.
I can't argue with any of those.
No, not really. Perfect logic. But yeah, if you couldn't have guessed from that lovely intro, we today
This
are
is
going
now
to be
a Pirates of the Caribbean cast. So,
yeah. We just talked about pirates now. Welcome, mateys. But no, yeah. So pre-orders just went up for the new Underworld's warband for Gorlock Black Powder and his Buccaneers, and the new Rivals deck, Illusory Might. So if you haven't seen that those are up yet, go check them out. By the time this is out, those should actually be available for folks to go purchase. So if you somehow missed that there was a new release, go grab those up. So obviously that's also the context for today's episode. We're recording just shortly after that pre-order is out. And I think it bears mentioning that we got a new Far and errata as well, which was a unexpected surprise.
Yeah. That was super cool. Unexpected is correct. I was, after as long as we waited for the last one, for this one to roll around when it did, was startling, but nice.
Yeah.
So
I was just thinking, I think somebody in our local Discord was just saying that like they counted it out and it was like 82 days from the last one, which is a shocking difference from the last 8-month wait or whatever it was.
Yeah. And not to get too much into it, but you figure everything they do has some lead time. And there's stuff on there that is definitely with an eye, like there's some restrictions that clearly were made in the context of the Harrow Deep meta. So like scant resources in a previous season, there's no way it's going to be restricted. The fact that it is, or that Sepulchral Guard have a restricted card now.
Yeah, Claim the City is restricted.
Yeah,
that was fun.
So, all kinds of stuff. We may get to that for a full episode, but there's a whole lot to cover. And if you need something in the meantime, I did listen through to our buddies over at Path to Glory. Did a great coverage with it, and also have Jason Murray on there. And they kind of go through each of the documents and lay out their thoughts on that. So
yeah, some good stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, so today, as we mentioned, we're going to focus on the Buccaneers. Just try and run down who they are, what the faction is like, some hot shooting from the hip tips and tricks that we're thinking about, sort of what we think their initial playstyle might be. But before we dive into that too deeply, we got our standards. So we got some community shout outs. So to start things off, I guess I just want to, again, I know we kind of do this just about every time there's a release, but it's always surprising to me every single time that, the folks running the community built deck builders, it's almost like the day that they have images, within a few hours of those images being available, they're usually up on at least Underworld's TV. And that's amazing. It makes deck building completely seamless for folks who immediately want to start diving into the new cards. So again, tip of the hat. It's really appreciated that folks are willing to just do that out of the goodness of their hearts and giving up their time. Of course, they're probably doing it out of a love for the game, but it's benefiting the whole community. And then just all the reviews that get posted right away. I know in some ways, when people have some lead time, and I guess we should mention for our review here, we also got early copies of both Illusory Might and Gorlock's Buccaneers. And those are free from GW, and we really appreciate them doing that so that we have a chance to look at stuff ahead of time. But people actually looking at it, reviewing it, recording, and then getting it out like day they can, that, it's takes some work. So I'm still always surprised, and I always love seeing what everybody's initial takes are. So hope that people can keep that work up, and we can keep the community sort of community think tank going. There's the word. Couldn't think of it. How about you, Davy?
A couple things. So, mentioned Jason Murray. I listened to. I haven't gotten all the way through, but Battle Mallet is back. Those guys love Rivals. We love Rivals. I think it's everything. Oh, I don't know. I think it's what I wanted Vanguard to be, as the easy pickup thing.
Yes.
And I think it's great. So I think it's filling the spot that Vanguard wanted to be. Anyway, that's getting off topic again. But what Battle Mallet does is it's part 1 of question mark number of episodes about Rivals, and they cover all the Rivals decks from Beastgrave, pros, cons, playing against, all that sort of thing. So I've only just a little bit into it. Really, really excited to have those guys back. So great to see them. And as we have some welcome backs, we have some farewells. So really wanted to say, give a salute to Shuby, who helped run one of the big discords for the community. He's got to take a step back. Everybody gets to that point. It's kind of some of the thoughts that he was saying. I think something along the line of some of the ideas he had. He didn't have the energy to follow through on them, and he didn't want to be that kind of Discord leader, vassal leader. So, but the stuff that he's done to keep the community rolling, particularly throughout the pandemic, is just tremendous. And he's not somebody that we shout out very often, and that's too bad, because we should have. So, Shuby, thanks for all you've done. You're awesome, and hope you get some well-earned rest here. And on a similar note, Matt from Set the Tempo is going to take a break from content creation, but he arranged for Compaq to step in on his behalf. And I've talked a couple of times about how much I loved Compaq's article on the Mad Mob. In the way of royalty, Set the Tempo is dead. Long live Set the Tempo. So I've been talking with Matt a little bit. We may still get to hear from him through this or other channels. It's one thing to create content, and it's another to hop on and throw your views out. And I think he's still got that kind of energy. So you've not heard the last of him. So, but really looking forward to seeing what Compaq kicks out there. I've been really enjoyed his articles so far.
Definitely. Probably hear a little bit wider range of his thoughts than usually. It's a lot of Mad Mob focused things, but it's always good because I feel like the Mad Mob don't get enough love. And then I guess quickly, what the heck is going on with you, Davey? Been doing anything in the hobby?
A little bit of a hiatus. We took a temporary stall on the league, just with case numbers spiking here. We decided to pause one. Yeah, some of our local members are doing okay, but they actually went down with COVID. So the in-person has been on hold a little bit, and mostly it's pondering what I want to bring to Adepticon if Adepticon carries through. So. It's the usual thing where I think I've decided, and then I listen to somebody else's content or read something else, and I'm like, no, what I need to do is play that war bands. So, well, I think some front runners right now are Crushes and Cruel Boys, just because I've not really played either of those. And I might go Cruel Boys. I think Cruel Boys feel a little trixier, and I get to feel smarter than I actually am if I pull something off with them.
They certainly felt smart when they destroyed me when we played earlier today. But that's so out of character for you. Usually you go for the super dark horse warband.
Yeah, I mean, there's still time.
There's still time. We can have a last minute change to the hunt.
Might just get Blade Coven painted up in time.
Oh, yes. Perfect. They're all assassins now, basically. So it should be good. All right. And for
What about
me,
you?
yeah. So I got our copy of the Buccaneers, and I think that they seem like a really interesting design space. I don't know how good they're going to be yet. We can kind
Hmm.
of talk through some of that, I guess. But I built them all up this morning. The models are pretty cool. Uh, Gorlock himself is absolutely massive. I think his base is the same size as Molog's. Um, so it takes up like a whole like the entirety of the hex basically. He is quite
Oh,
large.
I guess he's bigger than Hrothgorn, huh?
I think he might stand about the same height, but his base is definitely bigger, and I think that's just because they
Okay.
needed to accommodate the sword and the gun because he's kind of
Hmm.
like splayed out a little bit more and
Yeah.
um, yeah. But so really cool models. I guess for folks who are building their own soon. He's a little finicky to try and get put together. He's kind of one of those where it's like a shell, sort of like a puzzle box, where you're gonna have to put all the pieces together to make the full body. So you've got like
Hmm.
his back and his front and his sides and his arms kind of all come together
Oh, interesting.
just so. And it's like I had to really like hold him together when I put the final piece on because there were some gaps and stuff. So, um, but it's still really cool. So I'm looking forward to that, and I think I might switch over to playing these guys for a while. I've been almost exclusively playing Stalkers since they came out, so a change of pace
Hmm.
would probably be good, and give a chance to figure out how good these guys actually are.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about it.
Yeah, let's do that. So, Black Powder's Buccaneers. So I think it's always good to just start with fighters. So who these guys are? Uh, just a quick overview for folks who don't know. We got a 5 fighter warband here. We got in the same style as Hrothgorn. We've got one big ogre. He's Gorlock Black Powder, and then we've got 2 minions, the little Noblars, and then 2 companions, which is a little bit different because you only have the one companion for Hrothgorn. Um, but yeah, where would you like to start, Davey? Do you want to start just by looking at individual fighters or run down core mechanics? What do you think makes the most
Let's hit up
sense?
the core mechanics because they're going to get mentioned on each of these, and
Sure.
so they'll kind of they tie the warband together in a couple of ways.
Yeah.
So uh, there's swag counters and light fingered, which are kind of complementary things.
Yep.
Swag counters are something they're not held on a fighter; they're held by the player, as far as I can figure.
Yep.
Uh, and those swag counters are needed to fire Gorlock's Grunderbuss, with a couple of
Yes.
exceptions. He discards one in order to shoot it. He starts with one, and then he specifically inspires by discarding his second or subsequent, and it doesn't have to be in a single. So it could be one in round one and another one in round two. The way you get those, I think there may be a power card in there to get them, but then otherwise it's the light finger reaction, and it's after any of your other fighters, after they make a successful attack action that targets an adjacent fighter, pick one of the target's upgrades and break that card. When you break that card, you gain one swag counter, uh, and that is also what inspires the fighters that are light fingered. There's more than one power card that gets such a swag counters. Now that I think about it, but so
Yeah.
it's this interesting thing where the inspiration for the little guys unlocks the inspiration for the big guy, and then the inspiration for the little guys is also kind of gated behind your opponent getting swag or getting upgrades from which you can then get swag. Um,
Yeah.
so on balance, that feels like a fairly slow inspiration unless you can find a way to dig for use something for extra swag in your deck, and we'll talk about those cards whether they're worth it. But does that sound like a general good overview of their complementary stuff?
I definitely think so.
Yeah.
I think that's a fine rundown of that. And I do think swag and figuring out how to sort of manage that resource is probably going to be the number one most important thing for
Hmm.
this warband. But we'll see. Obviously, this is just some hot takes.
Yeah.
All right. So now that we know generally what the whole warband is trying to do, let's dive into the actual fighters themselves. So starting with the big boss, we got Gorlock Black Powder. Um, so he is your sort of typical ogre. So 6 wounds, which is probably the most important thing to note right off the bat. 1 block,
Hmm.
3 movement. So big, slow, but really hard to bring down. Um, as we mentioned, he's got his Grunderbuss, which he has to shoot with his swag ammo. But it's a pretty good attack. It's 3 range, 3 fury for 2 damage. So the only thing I can figure as to why they made this tied to the swag mechanic, well, so I've got 2 thoughts. Either they were thinking that it's too strong to let him just shoot as many times as he wants. And I could definitely see that if they kept it at 3 swords for 2 damage. They would probably have to do something because otherwise it's like he's just a crazy turret at that point.
Yeah.
And the other would be that maybe they did this as a top down design where they said, we want him to be a pirate. So he's going to have some sort of a flintlock like gun. And sort of the idea there would be it needs to be reloaded. And so they wanted to have some sort of mechanic that like reflected that.
Hmm.
And I guess this does that. I don't know, obviously, which they were going for. I would tend to think that they were taking lessons from Hawthorne and wanting to limit how many shots he can take in a turn, because sometimes Hrothgorn can just find a spot in the middle of the board and start unloading on folks. But
Sure.
that's just my thoughts. And then he's got his Great Cutlass, which is 2 range, 2 smash for 3 damage, which I think is basically the best attack profile we ever see on an initial fighter. I think that's
Right.
the same as
Right. Right.
Mollog, right? So
Yeah. I mean,
uh,
here's the thing: if you said, "Hey, there's going to be a fighter in this warband, and it's going to have 6 health, and it's going to have 2 attacks on its card. One's going to be range 3, 3 fury, 2 damage. The other one's going to be 2 range, 2 smash, 3 damage." You're like, "What are you doing?" Like that.
yeah, it'd be like, oh, Mollog's with a gun. Okay, cool. That seems fair. Uh, yeah. So I definitely think that limiting the gun probably is, like I said, is probably more of a balanced thing than anything else.
Hmm.
Uh, and yes, there's not much to say about his inspired side, which is probably a good thing. So you don't really have to worry about spending the swag just for the inspire. But once he is inspired, he goes up to 4 move and 4 fury for his shot. I guess 4 move is pretty nice, but I don't know that. I don't know. What do you think? Would you care to inspire just for that?
I think it seems like it's not especially important, but I think there may be a build where you go all in on the gun, where you try to like keep churning through. That might be tough because it's dependent on the light fingered going off. So
Yeah.
it's not that, but uh, four fury also helps unlock some of his other. He's got some power cards that get better if the gun is better. But I don't think this warband will live or die off of whether you can inspire him. I think it might just be a nice to get sometimes, in the same way that the Dread Pageant sometimes inspires, but a lot of times does not.
Yeah, that was kind of my thinking as well, is that at least for Gorlock, inspiration is incidental. It's like if it happens, great. He gets a little bit better, but otherwise he is a beast of a fighter without inspiring. So I don't think you really
Hmm.
care one way or the other.
Hmm.
Do you want to go minions or companions next?
I think minions, or sorry, companions, because they seem like, I think you talked about, based on our play experience so far, that they seemed like maybe the more important early. So
Yeah, I think so. You
um,
wanna start running down Shriek?
sure, Shriek is move 5, which, whoa, awesome.
Yep.
Starts on 2 dodge, which is solid. 2 health, it should be expected, and then a 3 Fury, 1 damage grievous attack. That's a pretty solid profile for a quote unquote little guy.
Yeah.
Shriek is also a beast, and in flies, as you would expect.
Yeah.
Shriek Shriek has light fingered, and then has a reaction. Well, a couple things. So he's got the if he's within 2 hexes of black powder supporting this fighter, which makes that attack all the more accurate.
Yep.
And after friendly black powder makes a move action, you can push this fighter up to 3 hexes. After this push, the fighter must be within 2 hexes of that black powder. So this can be to set up a later charge for you. It can be to give a support to something that black powder is about to shoot or chop or something like that. Or just get in if somebody, I mean, this is a good way to set up to maybe disrupt if somebody is doing the scant resources thing, pull Shriek onto something and then delve it at the end of the round so that Shriek is on it, it's uncovered, but it's not held because he's a beast.
Yeah.
So lots of cool tricks there. Shriek is, again, since Shriek is likely to be getting support from the big guy from Black Powder, Shriek is a pretty accurate attack and is a good way if you're looking to kick off your light fingered thing, because it does have to be a successful attack action. But
It does.
yeah, but with Shriek's speed, with his flying ability, and with the support, he can either hit somebody who's in the lines with a little bit extra help, or he can sail back if somebody tried to put an upgrade on somebody in the back lines that they thought was safe. You can boost him with the reaction and then fly at him. So I think Shriek is a pretty pivotal fighter early on. If Shriek inspires, I should mention, he'll pick up Stagger on that attack, which is handy if you're trying to drag somebody down. Goes to 3 dodge, which yikes, especially with cover hexes around.
Yeah.
And retains the other stuff. So
Yeah. I mean, man, I don't know. Stagger is one of those things that I have a hard time valuing, just because it's like, well, if they're on guard, it's really nice, but if they're not, like, yeah, okay, I guess you hit them and then you can put a stagger counter and you get those rerolls, but like there's a lot of setup there. I think it's a nice little boost to accuracy. I guess it's probably better than making him more accurate. Like going to 4 Fury feels like it would be too much.
I think what I think I like about that is that it sets him up in late game as, okay, like who on the enemy side is starting to get like pretty powerful, like with accuracy or damage upgrades. I'll send Shriek at him, maybe light fingered one of those upgrades off, stagger him, and now that fighter is potentially ripe for the killing after they've taken a damage or two and lost some extra stuff. So Shriek is a real kind of setup piece.
Yeah, he feels like you mentioned. I feel like he's going to be really important. I think if you can get him inspired early, if somebody has put out an early upgrade so that you can go pick that, putting him on, 5 speed, 3 dodge, that is rough.
Gnarly.
So I think he'll be really important. We'll see how well these 2 wound fighters hold up, though. That could be the trick.
Sure.
I guess I
think 2 wounds takes you farther than it used to, since there's not nearly as many lethals around. You can't get.
Yeah, it definitely does. And
lethal.
I was thinking about it more recently, and that, a lot of the meta right now is designed around 1-hit kills anyway. There's not a lot of like, I'm just going to go around and ping for 2 damage on big guys. It's like either I'm going for the haymaker or I'm probably not making the attack. And so like, I don't know if 3 wounds would have made these guys feel any tougher. Maybe.
Right.
I mean, it's a little bit, I guess. It helps against other teams like piddly little guys, but I think they still feel pretty tough. 2 dodge early is always helpful.
Yep.
And then we've got the other companion to go along with Shriek. So this is Mange. He's the monkey. He's got a bone club and a knife in his tail, which is pretty wild. So he's pretty similar. He starts with only 4 speed, but still 4 speed, 2 dodge, 2 wounds. So again, fairly hard to hit. interestingly enough, not a beast. So he can be given weapon upgrades. He can hold objectives if you needed to do that. Which is interesting.
Yeah, I totally overlooked that the first time we went through these cards, and
Yeah,
it's a
it's
cool. I mean, it just spreads your, because if you want some weapon upgrades, which arguably your Noblars might need to, it gives you one more fighter to keep that from being a redundant thing. So, your silent sword
yeah,
now has 3 people it could go on, 4,
yeah.
I guess.
And I guess I think it's worth mentioning that light fingered is not tied to the any of the attacks on their profile. It just has to be an attack action that's successful against adjacent fighters. So weapon upgrades probably are going to be useful for this warband if you think leaning into being able to break your opponent's upgrades is valuable. And I don't know, I can't imagine it not being useful, but uh, I don't know. The pacing might be a problem, but it still feels strong. So being able to load up mange, I think, could be useful. Um, and for his just base attack, he is the same as Shriek. He's got one range, 3 fury for 1 damage with Grievous. So not bad. It's not great, but it's not bad. And when he inspires, he is also then speed 5, 3 dodge, and his attack picks up Ensnare.
Yeah.
He does also have a reaction which makes it so that after a friendly minion makes a move action, he can push up to 3 hexes and must be within
Yeah.
2 hexes of that minion.
Both these guys seem like good setup ones. You can risk that charge on somebody to try and pull their new upgrade off of them.
Mm-hmm.
And if you pull it off, not only do you reduce them, but you jump yourself up to 3 dodge and you make yourself a very unappealing counter-strike target. Normally, sending
Yeah.
a 2-wound fighter into enemy territory, like, I might just be giving up that glory. This is, there's definitely risk, because if you miss, then they still have their upgrade and you're still only at your 2 dodge. But I think this maybe makes an argument for accuracy help for getting those first few through.
I definitely think so. I think however you want to do it, having these guys be accurate probably puts a lot of pressure on your opponent. Because all of a sudden their upgrades are in danger. And if you spent glory thinking, okay, now I've got +1 wounds or whatever, and they just go, nah, I'm just going to pull that off. It's like, wow, that's a big swing, even if it's for
Yeah.
1 or 2 damage attack. And we already mentioned some of the things you can do with that positioning, but I think it bears, remembering that like pushing 3 hexes is a lot.
Sure.
There's a lot of shenanigans you could do with being able to push 3.
And
Especially,
your restriction on this is very, very lenient, just being within
yeah,
2 of that minion, like this huge swath of the board.
yeah. There's huge amounts of the board that you can move from and end in. Like
Mhm.
you had to start 5 hexes away from where they ended to be able to use this. Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Most of the board seems fine. But I guess speaking of the minions, what are we going to be doing with these minions? Will Mange be wanting to follow these guys into combat?
Yeah. No. um, so there's Pegs, who's probably the least useful in the warband.
Yep.
Which a Nobbler missing a leg. I mean, who could blame that being the case? He's about as basic as it comes. 3 move, 1 dodge, 2 health, 1 range, 2 fury, 1 damage, uninspired. He does have light fingered. And on the flip side, he picks up a move, 1 defensive dice, and 1 extra dice for his attack action, and that is it. So he can help boost mange along. He can, if you're desperate, light finger something. But a good candidate for a weapon if the other people are down, perhaps. And
Yep.
that's about it. KG a little more interesting. What do you got on KG?
Definitely. So KG is same base stats. So 3 move, 1 dodge, 2 wounds. He has fly. I guess the
Amazing.
idea because he has a grappling hook, but like what? And then his attack is his grapnel. It's got range 3, 2 fury, 1 damage, but it has ensnare. So he's not like horrible at making ranged attacks for somebody who's a dangle bro. Uh,
Yep.
I
Smacked Torka right in the nose with that thing and killed him.
sure
Real
did.
bummer.
Got him good. Got pretty lucky, but he got him. And
Yep.
when he inspires, he also similarly he picks up 1 speed, 1 dodge, and 1 accuracy.
Yeah.
So I mean, I think KG inspired actually feels pretty solid to me. Of of these little supporting guys, I think you're right though. Pegs feels pretty bad. I don't know what you're really doing if you're having to rely on pegs too much. Though I suppose weapon caddy and little fighter cruise missile is not always a terrible thing to be doing.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
I think these two guys do make the argument for including at least one weapon in there just to keep them relevant.
yes, I would definitely agree. I don't know which ones you use exactly. I don't think you want any like combo sort of type stuff, but
No,
like
no. Yeah.
swords, nets, maybe some of the spears just so they could have reach. Like,
Yeah.
although that doesn't synergize with light fingered very well.
Yeah.
Um, but
Or
but I think
something super accurate like the setup, right? Like that was the
yeah, right,
two dice and your opponent doesn't get to roll defense. So
right. So as long as you can hit, you can peel those upgrades off. Which when you've got a 75% chance of succeeding, that's pretty good.
yeah,
I
especially if
guess
someone's stacking defense. If someone's
yeah,
piling stuff up on Glissette or something like that, you say, well, okay, I'll
yep.
peel some of those off, and I don't care that you're on guard in a cover token supported or
Yeah,
whatever.
you don't get dice anyway. It doesn't matter.
Yeah,
You
do whatever
not
you want.
pass go. Do not collect
Yeah,
$200. I guess it. Before we move on to cards, I think it's maybe worth just talking quickly about like. So, how do you feel about light finger just as a mechanic in the game, and how do you feel it plays out um, over the course of a game? Because from the game that we played, it
right.
felt it felt like in round 1 it might as well have not been on the cards.
Yeah.
Um, so I'm a little worried that like you won't be able to inspire any of the little guys until at least round 2.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is going to be the case. You're unlikely, unless they get. I mean, I don't know if this sets up a thing like, I'm going to give you pegs to kill, so that you put an upgrade on, then I can steal it back from you.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that seems like maybe a little crazy, but also if
Yeah,
people are swinging at pegs, then fine. Um, I think what I really like about this mechanic potentially is that this is a snowball game. We talk a lot about that,
mm-hmm.
and early success kind of builds into more and more. These guys are one of the few ways that is not necessarily true. Like I think, like you said, it's might as well not be on the card at the start. But in later rounds, it's potentially a very big deal that it is. So they
Yeah,
may be at an early disadvantage, but then they're in a position to potentially put their opponents at a disadvantage later in the game,
right.
presuming the opponent didn't turbo mode too quickly. But if there's like a crucial upgrade, they can come rip that right back off if you can land those hits, which is admittedly potentially a challenge.
Yeah,
And
which I,
that's where actually but I
yeah,
really like to see where that plays out because you have a pretty solid profile on black powder to try and get you by early, and then these guys to make sure that the other side doesn't really super power up.
yeah, definitely. And I think this sort of is going to take some time to finagle, but I have to imagine like this is such a different way of playing the game than anything we've sort of seen before, because this
Hmm.
is essentially like control on turbo mode, right? You're like,
Yeah,
not only can I like control positioning, but I'm going to control how many upgrades you have potentially.
yeah,
You do have
yeah,
to hit, but like if you mitigate that as much as possible, that could end up being really annoying. Um,
yeah.
So I don't know. I'm curious to try it out. I'm really excited for it, but I would be interested to hear what other folks' experiences are and what your sort of hot takes have been once you hear this. Shall we move on to talking about some objectives and how we think they will work with these guys?
Yeah, sounds good.
All right.
I think one thing worth mentioning right away on the objectives is it looks like they are in the 4 surge 8 end phase situation. And
They
if I remember
sure
correct, the
are.
first 2 warbands we saw this season were also 4 surges. So we're starting to see maybe a little consistency um, within, and that has to be like a conscious nod towards rivals play, right? Like
I have to
rivals
think
doesn't
so.
work if rivals doesn't work if one warband has 7 or 8 surges, however much Hrothgorn has.
Yeah, these sort
So,
of
which to be
strange.
fair, yeah, he wasn't designed for that format. So
Yep.
um, I think this has got to be a guideline that they're at least roughly going by.
Yeah. And I guess overall, I can see that. They're trying to slow the format down a little bit for rivals play, which is probably good because the idea is to have this be your entry into the game. So making it less intense. Um, so I think it's overall a decent choice. I think it does potentially mean that you're designing up a bunch of end phase objectives that maybe won't get used much, but I guess we can decide that after we read through all the cards. Do you want to start with
Yeah,
surges or end phases?
let's start with surges. There's fewer of those. So
Yeah.
uh, uh, first one I see is Broadside, and it's score immediately after your leader's second or subsequent Grunderbuss attack action in the same phase. Um, that is potentially tricky because you can only get that second shot unless you can only get that second shot if you get a swag counter or there's a number of power cards that will either let you make out of phase attacks or take a shot that doesn't actually use any swag. So there's some ways around it. Um,
Yeah,
what's nice about this is they don't have to be successful, at least. So
it's true. I mean, if you have the right power cards, this is a very easy score. But like you say, you do need swag if you don't have power cards, and that could be a problem. I still think this is, at least for the rivals deck, this is probably one of your more reliable options.
mm,
Not 100% sure how I feel about it in regular championship play. Um,
mm,
there's a lot of sort of moving parts to try and score this immediately. There's probably easier choices when you've got somebody who's stomping around swinging at range 2 for 3 damage. Um,
yeah, yeah,
but overall, I would say this is a decent card. It's definitely worth considering it at any rate. It's not an immediate out.
sure. You got to use gold diggers in some of our practice here. What did you
I
think of
did.
gold diggers?
I think Gold Diggers seems like a really great option. The question is, how reliably can you keep your little guys alive?
What
So
what? Yeah,
yeah, so what this is essentially is a reworked Swift Capture. So for folks who don't know, this is a surge duel where you score it immediately after a power step if 2 or more friendly fighters are on feature tokens. That's sort of the important rework from Swift Capture. And 1 or more of those fighters are in enemy territory. So it's essentially saying you have to be on a feature token in your territory and in enemy territory. Well, I guess you could have them both in enemy territory. That's sort of an interesting uh,
yeah,
difference as well. But so you're holding 2, which is not terribly difficult. And the nice change here is that they're just feature tokens. So
yeah,
uh, you're not holding. So that does open up this card to your entire warband. And we already
yeah,
mentioned about how the companions have those push mechanics, which are pretty nice. So you could set that up this way. The score's for 1, but I mean, this is a really easy score 1. I think this is almost an auto include in my mind. Like, I don't, you could be pushing forward with Gorlock and then have 1 little guy just hang back and stand on a feature token in your territory, and you pick this up for 1. So
Yep.
I don't know. What did you
Or
think?
alternatively, like you bomb Shriek or someone in onto a cover, and they're 2 dodge with
Yeah.
cover.
Or I
I should
suppose
say gloom.
in like a perfect world, round 1, you could be moving up Gorlock onto a token and then pushing Shriek onto a token and just score this in 1 move. Like, there's some interesting play patterns with this. I think it's gonna be solid. Um,
Yeah, I would expect to see it in a lot of Gorlock decks.
yes, I think this will be one that definitely makes it into championship decks. I don't know that unless you really want to lean away from standing anywhere specific and just want to go aggro. I think you play Gold Diggers.
Hmm.
How about brutal belaying? What do you think about this one?
Oh yeah, brutal belaying is a score immediately after a friendly fighter's range 1 or 2 attack action that took the target out of action if that friendly fighter had 1 or more supporting fighters. And I think that's great. You have the ability to kind of slide some people around, so you can set this up a little easier using Shriek or something, and
Yep.
then Gorlock can score it with his big cutlass. So I think that's solid. I think that's right in there. So
Yeah,
um,
feels like a nice one. Not as nice as some of the things that you have for uh, the the new Crow Boys.
right.
Just because their support stuff, it's like, oh, just like make a supported attack, right? They've got a surge.
Was Torque and Tough Skull wandering by when you made your attack?
Yeah,
If
right.
so,
Some really really nice easy scores there, but this is still pretty good. I
yeah.
think with all the movement shenanigans that you can do, this shouldn't be too difficult. The only downside, I guess, is that you do have to kill to score with it, and as we mentioned earlier, the minions and companions don't hit very hard, so you'll have a tough
Mm,
time picking it up with them, I think.
that's true.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, the last surge is Maneater. This one is in rivals maybe okay. Otherwise, it is pretty not great. There's better ones for your leader. This needs your leader to kill somebody, but it has to be with range 1 or range 2, and they have to be uninjured when you started the attack. That's 2 more
Yeah.
caveats than what Savage Exemplar puts
Yep.
on. Savage Exemplar is like, hey, your leader kills somebody, good to go.
Yep.
So you got a couple places you're going to stop before you go for this if you have the choice. Um,
Yeah.
so,
I think for rivals, this still feels like a solid option. Like I think all of these surges are serviceable in a rivals format, but like they're just giving you a couple extra hoops to jump through. And I'm
mm,
not. So this is sort of an interesting question. This is something that I think we've talked about before, but like it always feels like the way they design cards is that the generics are sort of the strongest version of the card that's going to exist, and then the
mm.
in faction versions are like the slightly watered down version. Why? I can't ever quite figure why that would be. Like,
Well,
shouldn't.
that was true. That was very true in Shadespire, and I think you
Well,
and I maybe
yes,
have a bias
definitely.
for that. It's no longer a strictly universal rule. Like you think of things like
No, it's not
uh,
universal, but
Wanchi's device or the Slanesh push or something like those are cards that are
true.
like
They're
clearly better.
the power cards. I think have definitely gotten better. I was mostly thinking about objectives, I guess, where it's like
Mm,
it feels like a lot of times the in faction objectives, outside of a few specific examples, probably are generally a little tougher than the generics. And I guess I could be wrong about that. That, like you said, that could be some old bias, but it's like in this case, it does feel like that. It's sort of like, well,
mm.
brutal belaying. There's probably better options that do similar things. Maneater, we already mentioned one card just offhand that does exactly the same thing, but it's easier. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think they're solid for rivals play, and some of them will be used in championship. So
Hmm, sure.
a decent selection there.
Any end phase jump out at you?
Yeah, I think so. I think one that really am drawn to just because it feels like a nice, easy one to include if you need some reliable round one glory is Treasure Hungry. So this
Mm,
is a score in an end phase if two or more friendly fighters are on feature tokens. Gets one
yeah.
glory, but nice and simple. There's no restrictions as to where you need to be, who needs to be doing it. Just put two fighters on feature tokens, which, as of right now, that is sort of the meta anyway. Everybody wants to be on them for defensive bonuses or denying hold objective plays. So, yeah, why not?
Yeah. I mean, it makes you wonder a little bit. Is there a like with and there's a lot more cards to go through, but when I see stuff like this, I'm like, I wonder if there's like a low scoring control build for these guys where I'm going to score very reliable stuff. Um, maybe have somebody pop forward with uh, gold diggers, grab that glory, and then find a way to retreat or something like that with some of your reactions.
Yeah,
And get that. And then your opponent is also slow rolling, but because you are slow rolling as well and have the ability to peel off as they start to get an upgrade here or there, you peel those back off. Maybe there's something there. I don't know. It makes me want to explore that a little bit.
I agree. Like I mentioned earlier, this feels like maybe a control on turbo mode potential.
Hmm.
I don't know if it'll work out, but I think there's potential, and I'm curious to see how that works out when you've got a giant beat stick that maybe signpost says aggro, but in the fine print it's like actually control.
Right.
Any that jumped out at you? Things that seemed like really nice inclusions here.
Uh, what I what made me do a lot of thinking as well was the eyes on the prize, and this is a score in an end phase. If you have three or more
Yeah,
swag counters, if you score it and you have six or more swag counters, you get one additional glory. So it's either two or three, depending on whether you have three or six swag. And I think there's a build where you just say, "Hey, this guy's cutlass is pretty great. I'm not going to shoot it, or if I do shoot it, it's going to be one of these options that don't burn swag counters, and we get this." And I think this may be part of that control build where you find ways to
yeah,
sneak in some swag counters. Um, some of those ways of collecting swag counters don't involve rolling dice, and so you can use this in combination with other things to maybe have that control passive ish glory build stuff up that is so I like that this points at, hey, think about this other play style that might be there. So I
yeah.
think that's cool.
I think one thing that I like about this one uh, as well is that, as far as I can tell, because of the way the swag counters are worded, you don't they're not like on a fighter. So even if your whole warband was dead, but you still have
Mm,
enough swag
sure.
counters to score this, you know that there's
Yeah.
like, if you haven't drawn it yet, you can go digging, and you've got that option, which I think is pretty
Well, and
cool.
then I also, yeah, I like that it has the two possibilities. So if I'm running a deck that has this and it comes up in the second round, I'm like, yeah, two glory is good for now. Like I'm going to get that. I don't need to hang on to this just for the one more.
Yep.
And then because you scored this, you have at least three swag. Gorlock can then just go on a Reservoir Dogs shooting rampage or something, like
Yeah.
afterwards, because it's like, hey, I don't need these swag for anything anymore. I'm just gonna start blazing away.
Yeah.
So that's kind of cool. You can just unleash the gun.
Which is something I hadn't thought about, but like there could be that situation where you're sort of hanging back, you're building up, and you do get to the end of the game and you're like, okay, I'm in a good position now. I've got enough swag. I can just take pot shots for 2 damage a shot, like potentially more if you've stacked upgrades that can work on his range attack. So some interesting play patterns that I hadn't even really considered, but
Yeah,
feels pretty good.
yeah.
So to kind of go along with some of that swag stuff, we do have another one that counts swag counters, and that's Loaded with Booty. So this is a duel. You score it in an end phase if you have two or more swag counters and two or more friendly fighters are on a feature token that is not in your territory. So I think this is definitely a bigger ask. You are having to push
Yeah.
forward. You have to have at least two fighters, but we do, like, as we've continued to mention, that push three could really unlock some of this. And getting two swag counters is not exactly difficult. If you can find
Mhm.
a way to manage to pick up one and you didn't spend it, you could be scoring this even in round one. And it's for two glories. So I don't think it's great. But if you're going to lean into it, I think it's definitely an option. What do you think?
Yeah. I think so. I think this does not. This is if you're trying that more control build, this is a tougher ask because it involves
Yep.
pushing not one but two people in and having them there in the end phase. So kind of challenging there. But I think there's maybe a hybrid play where like I don't really lean on the gun real hard. We get in so, but I think they're probably in championship play. There might be better two glory ones if you're planning on running into enemy territory anyway.
Yeah, I would agree with that for sure. I guess kind of to go along with some of these. So again, we have another one then that is about pushing into enemy territory. So it's Bold Tails. It's another two glory end phase. You score it if either three or more friendly fighters are on feature tokens that are not in your territory. So basically supremacy outside of your territory. Wow, that sounds rough. Or three or more enemy fighters are out of action. Also kind of rough.
Yeah,
I mean, worst case scenario, this is either a harder, less glory supremacy or a harder, less glory annihilation. Both bad options. Um,
yeah,
and then I guess best case scenario, you're facing off against like goblins and you just try to pick off three of them quick for
sure.
two glory. But like, man, that feels rough. And using it in our game for practice, that felt like a bad objective. I don't I don't know that there was really, other than drawing it in the third round and hoping you got a bunch of kills. I don't know that I'm ever wanting to see that one.
Yeah, yeah, that's a tough one. Um, were there any other? The only other one that jumped out to me as, hey, I would think about including this is aspiring tyrant. This is just your leader has to be on a feature token in enemy territory, or one or more leaders are out of action. It's not. I mean, it's just one glory for the end phase,
Yeah,
um, but it's pretty doable.
I think it's
So I,
doable, and I think you scored incidentally, right? I mean, especially in rivals, like your
yeah,
big six wound fighter that you're just kind of wanting to slowly weight up the board with. You
yeah,
can you can set a feature token somewhere just across the line, and then charge forward and shoot or move forward and slash, because having that extra range on both of his attacks means just standing on a feature token still means he's got plenty of options for making attacks.
yeah. Any others you wanted to talk about before we went to gambits, or
um I mean, I think maybe the only other one that's like decent. So I'll say Tall Tale and Smash and Grab. Both seem kind of bad, so we don't need to probably mention them. The cards are up for folks if you want to go check those out. I don't think we need to really talk about them. Um, Brash Braggart, though, does feel like something that could come up kind of incidentally as well. This is an end phase if your leader is within two hexes of two or more enemy fighters.
hmm,
So if you're just kind of in the middle of the board, you can score this for one glory. Uh, Again, I think it's fine for rivals. I don't know. I think most likely you find something better when you're building for championship, though.
I agree. I suppose in the meta where it is brawling across the middle, it's pretty doable, and it also means you probably set yourself up for a good next turn, where you can
Yeah, you would hope.
leverage your large cutlass to just start bopping people on the head. So
Yeah,
it's theoretically something you're trying to do anyway.
definitely. I mean, I guess, although I said probably not. Do you think we should talk about Tall Tale or Smash and Grab?
No, I mean people can look those up. I think
Okay.
they're not great. So
Yep, I would agree. So we got some ploys. I think there's some decent ones. Which ones do you find to be most interesting?
um,
Where do you want to
I'll
start?
put a I'll put a quick aside. I have a real soft spot for gambits or for card names that tie together. So I think
Oh yeah.
I think Canaan's Reapers had one of these like never rest, never sleep, never falter, or something like that,
Yep.
or never tire. I don't know, whatever they were, but
Sort of
these guys
a
have been there and
series.
done that. Yeah, they aren't even all that remarkably tied together. I guess they're both reactions, so that's cool.
They
Um,
are.
just talk about these. So done that is reaction. Play this after an adjacent fighter failed its action that targeted your leader. Gain 1 swag counter. Pretty restrictive because it's got to be a miss and you're only on 1 block and it's got to be adjacent. However, for 1 swag counter, there may be builds again that kind of control build,
Yep.
and you can double it up because one thing we didn't mention is that our boy Black Powder is a brawler, and so he's a great one to pick up unfazed, which is a universal. If you're a brawler, if somebody's adjacent to you, you get 1 extra defense dice.
Mm.
So he
Yeah.
can boost himself to 2 block. I think there's some illusions, maybe specifically destruction illusions that are defensive buff. I think there's one that's like -1 to adjacent attack action, so you can make yourself harder to hit and potentially set this up. Um,
Yeah.
and getting that extra swag counter could be a big deal.
Yep.
So I think when I first saw it, I was like, no, I don't think so. But I think in the right build, this actually might be handy. You just have to decide if the card is worth the swag counter. With the additional caveat that this is a valuable reaction to block.
It's true.
The defensive after attack reaction is a good place to set up because you can block a wolf bite from Rippas. You can block any of the attack again reactions. So that in itself has value.
Yeah.
Um,
I think there. I mean, I guess maybe it. I'd have to think about it a little more, but I think there are right now a decent number of warbands that kind of have a volume of attacks rather than accuracy. So there may be some
mm,
situations where you're like, yeah, okay, you took your 2 fury wolf bite. I can just done that off of that. That's not not a horrible thing to have.
yeah, yeah. Um, and then Ben there is the companion here, and that this is a kind of a cool movement one, which I think I'd need to see a little more to decide if it's good. So reaction: play this after an enemy fighter's charge action. Your leader makes 1 move action. After that move action, your leader must be adjacent to that enemy fighter. So it's kind of like counter charge, except it's a move. Uh, so if his speed is increased from something like being inspired or whatever the case, upgrades or
Yeah, he
why
could
am I he can really cover a lot of ground with this. However, it is a move token, so it's gonna if he has not done something yet this round, it hampers him. But I think where it really comes in is somebody says like, "Oh, he already moved. Now I can go somewhere else on the board and be safe." And you're like, "Well, no, I'm going to use this to turbo over somewhere else." So uh,
Yep.
mobility ploys and especially reaction mobility ploys always got some play in my mind. But
Yeah.
whether it's better than just a sidestep or something, it's harder to say.
Or even just counter charge. I mean, I don't know if you
Yeah,
counter charge is push 3.
push 3.
Yeah. So I mean the baseline for this more often than not is that it's a restrictive version of counter charge. But yeah, like you said, you could end up with higher speed, and that could be interesting. I think there's room for it. It's just like you said, it's that question of like, do you have a play in mind for it to be useful? Because I mean, extra movement is always good, but you can't just throw it in and expect it to do work for you. I think.
What about you? Anything that you caught your eye wanted to talk about?
Yeah, I think there's a number here that are just like good, and are probably worth talking about, and then I think there's a few others that maybe are interesting and have some play. I think we can start with the ones that are just kind of interesting. So I'll start with Hasty Shot. So this is a weird one. So you play this as an additional cost. You discard a power card, and I think that's maybe going to be the toughest part about using this card. Is that if you've
Mm,
built your deck correctly, you probably don't want to be discarding anything. Um,
sure.
but if you do, you then, uh, with your leader, can make a Grunderbuss attack action, but at -1 dice, and it does not use the ammo ability. So it's a free attack, almost. Right? You have to pay a card,
You're right.
which
Yeah.
is a lot. Um, like there are times where that could swing a game,
Hmm.
uh, and since it's in the power step, it could catch people off guard. I don't know that I would necessarily run it, but if you are going hard aggro, sometimes just having extra attacks could be the thing that swings the game for you. So I'm
Yeah.
curious about it, but I think it needs more playtesting to decide if it actually
Sure.
makes sense to use. I'm a little confused as to why they felt it needed to both discard a power card to activate and then have an accuracy reduction. Um,
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fair to be because if he finds himself accuracy boosts from supports or rerolls or trapping somebody, which often start to filter in as the season goes on, um, then then
yeah,
uh,
I mean,
then
it
even the
could
-1 dice probably doesn't.
become a little too good, I guess.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh,
Like you think if he's got boosts or if he's got Glory Seeker or something, all of a sudden he's like really blowing
yeah,
people up.
really,
So
really scary. Yeah, no, that's fair.
yeah.
That's fair. Um, I guess I'll just sort of combine that one with the other shooting one that I think is interesting, but probably not worth taking most of the time. So you've got Makeshift Munitions. Um, so this is just for your next Grunderbuss attack. You have -1 damage, but it doesn't use ammo. So you
Mm,
don't if you care about having the swag counters, this gives you a way to suddenly take that shot without
yeah.
spending the swag. It's only going to be for 1 damage though. But if you've got ways of boosting it, this could still mean a pretty effective ranged attack. So if you want to lean into his ranged stuff, I think there's room for it, but like you've really got to have a good plan. I don't know what your
Yeah.
thoughts are.
Yeah. I think I've seen. I kind of looked at the pile of cards that he's got a lot. There's a lot in this deck that revolve around that Grunderbuss in one way or the other.
Yep.
And I think it would be a mistake to say I'm going to be all about the Grunderbuss. I'm going to throw every card that references it into a deck because I think they'll end up making a little bit of a mess of each other. But I think
Yes.
if you pick and choose wisely, you can build around that. Admittedly, pretty powerful attack to be starting out with. So,
Yeah.
uh,
It kind of feels like maybe these are both better in the control style where you're just trying to be advantageous as much as you can be, um, and being able to get extra free shots could be pretty useful, but that's sort of an unformed thought, but that's sort of where my brain's going with that.
sure.
Uh,
Uh, my companion card for Hasty Shot would have been Flurry of Claws, because that is another power step attack.
it is. I think this one's just good. I think you just run this.
Yeah, I think you do too, because we already kind of established that those companions have pretty okay attacks, and again, particularly like we talked about, like the risk of sending Shriek in to if potentially stagger somebody or peel upgrades off. If you got this in hand, you got another attempt, or heck, even two attempts. Like two, you go in. Uh, if you hit with Shriek, peel an upgrade off. Now Shriek is inspired and can make another attempt at it or something like that. But uh,
Yeah.
what I guess I didn't read this out. Choose one friendly companion. The chosen fighter makes one of the attack actions on their fighter card. What I like about that is it specifies their fighter card, so you can't give mange, some combo weapon and say, guess what? He's gonna combo and combo or
Free
something like
combo
that.
monkey.
That
Here we
was
go.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think this is great. I think another chance at a crucial attack. What can you say? It seems solid.
Yeah,
So
I mean, as we've seen, pretty much any time they're printed, attacks that are happening in the power step are always very good. And an
yeah,
attack that is 3 Fury and Grievous, that's certainly has the potential to ruin someone's day if you get to make that attack again when they're not expecting it.
Yep.
But I think you're right. That one definitely goes along with that. I guess I only skipped over it just because I felt like it fit into these sort of like good, just auto include cards.
Yeah.
And the other one that I think is a good auto include is Gold Rush. So this is a choose up to 2 friendly fighters other than your leader. Push each of them 2 hexes towards the feature token closest to that fighter and in enemy territory. So it does have to push you into enemy territory, but getting to push any 2 of your non leader fighters is still very strong.
And to be clear, it does not actually have to push you into enemy territory, just towards enemy territory.
Just
right?
towards.
Like,
so
you could be deep in the back of your own board and get a push off of this.
Yeah. I think it's got a lot of flexibility, as most double push cards do. And like, as long as you end closer to that feature token, you're good. So there's probably ways you can kind of cheat this if you're far away as well. I guess I think maybe the only other one that I like a decent amount is Reckless Raid. So this gives +1 dice to all the range 1 attack actions of friendly fighters and -1 defense from friendly fighters to a minimum of 1 that persists until the end of the round. It's risky, but if you're in a situation where you know that you theoretically have some of those extra attack power cards, or if you're just like, okay, he's got 1 fighter left, I just need to get the job done here, that could be a pretty big swing to be like, oh, all of my minion fighters, or I guess if you maybe put an upgrade onto Gorlock, he could benefit from that as well, but
sure,
otherwise he's normally not range 1. But I think
we mentioned that some of the things that you might be looking for is accuracy with the light fingered. So this makes light fingered more likely to go off. And I can see a situation where maybe you have this in hand along with Flurry of Claws, and your last activation, I'm going to send Shriek. I'm going to play this. And I'm going to send Shriek forward. I'll make a 4 Fury Grievous attack, and then I'm going to Flurry of Claws and get a 4 Fury Grievous attack. That's pretty boss combo.
Yeah, I think there's plenty of play with this. At the very worst, it's just a end of round +1 dice. That's not horrible. And in the right situation, it's giving you a lot more than +1 dice. So,
yep,
I think it's good. Any of these remaining 3 that, or any other comments on that list?
I want to mention Grand Theft, just because we were talking about that build that maybe is trying to build up swag cards, swag counters, and Grand Theft sets you up so the first range 1 attack action made by a friendly fighter, and the next activation has Ensnare, and you gain a swag counter after resolving that attack action. Not a reaction or anything like that. You're just going to get it. If the fighter has an upgrade, you could potentially get 2 swag counters off that 1 attack where you light fingered an upgrade away, and then also get a swag. So I think you only pick this up if you really care about swag counters, because the Ensnare on its own is not great. But I think there's some builds where you would think about it.
Yeah, and it still boosts the accuracy of any of your little guys just out of the gate. So sometimes if that's just all you need, it's still decent. There's a lot of dodge in the game right now, so Ensnare is pretty valuable, but there's probably better choices. I think I'd take more dice generally over Ensnare if I had the choice. So like you said, the swag counter piece is really the thing that makes you think about that. There's only 2 left. So Snack Break is just bad. Don't run it. We don't need to mention it. You can look it up if you'd like. Healing Potion is directly better if you want a healing option. So that's what the card does. And then Punitive Damage, I don't really think there's much to mention about that one either. I don't know if you have other thoughts.
It's just a weird one. It's we've seen these cards before, and they don't very often get played. Where somebody gets attacked and you deal a damage back to the attacker. The only thing of note here is that you can deal 1 damage to an adjacent attacker as long as they weren't your leader, and it does not matter if the attack hit or missed or killed or left them alive. It'll just do it as long as they're adjacent. I
Yeah.
think you're probably going to find other things to put in your deck, but if you are going with that idea of like, I'm going to put like pegs out there to give them that glory that I can light fingered away with somebody else, then maybe you punish them for having killed pegs. I don't know.
Yeah.
I think if you really want to do something like that, maybe you are taking Omega's offering instead to get your glory going. And throw that
Agreed.
on.
I think
Yeah.
it's generally not a great option. There are so many powerful ploys. I don't see a good reason to want this one. Like, cool, if somebody attacks one of my little guys, they can take 1 damage.
Yeah.
In it might surprise people in rivals. This could pick up a late kill or something, but I that brings us on to the upgrades. We
Sure does.
definitely been seeing some patterns here. I guess just to recap, we've sort of been mentioning as we go, but it's a lot of information. So just as some things we've been seeing, I think you're seeing some patterns of wanting to be in enemy territory and wanting to have swag counters. Not necessarily
Yeah.
together, but those are sort of the two themes that at least I'm seeing, and that we've been talking about. So keeping that in mind, let's see if we like any of these upgrades. Uh, which one do you want to start with?
I'll start with Trogoth Grease because I think that
Oh,
is
so-
interesting. So just put the fighter on guard, but it's restricted to mange or one of the minions. So um,
yeah,
I think this is the right way to design a restricted upgrade in your warband. Going on guard is great. Going on guard is really great if you are a dodge fighter or a multiple dodge fighter.
yeah.
So if mange gets inspired with this, then it's crazy town. Um, and same
It's
if the little
super
guys,
crazy now.
yeah. But then there's 3 different people that it can go on, and that's because
Yeah,
they're all 2-wound fighters. Then that makes sense. Um, Counterpoint, something like thieving grapple. Uh, while being cool, like you cannot take an upgrade that is just restricted to one of your worst fighters who only has 2 wounds and could die very easily.
correct.
Um,
Do you
Similarly,
want to?
tiny. Oh
I
yeah.
guess
So
if you just want to
go ahead.
run, since you mentioned them, just want to run down what they
Sure.
actually do.
Yeah, 3 thieving grapple is a reaction after this fighter's move action. If you move through one or more enemy fighters during that action, roll 1 attack dice. If you get a smash, you pick an upgrade, break it, and you get a swag. So it's just a 1 in 3 chance to pick up a. I mean, it's cool because that's maybe about his chances of successfully landing an uninspired attack anyway. But um, and then he'd also be able to attack, so he could like charge with this. But it's just it's maybe you'll have a cool story from it in Rivals, but you shouldn't take it in Championship. Uh, Tiny Braggart is almost cool enough for me to take.
Ooh,
It's
yeah, it's interesting.
yeah, it's an illusion, so you don't have to need anything for it. It's restricted to Pegs, the worst fighter in the warband.
Very
He gets
much
+1
so.
move, +1 defense, and +1 damage. I mean, that sounds cool, but again, as soon as Pegs is dead, which could happen very quickly, then no bueno.
Yeah. And if anybody's got anything that can target him in the power step, as soon as you play this, if you're like, oh ho, look at what I'm doing next round, and then they go, ho ho, sidestep, or I guess distraction in this case, and it's like, oh,
Yeah,
yeah, right, never mind.
yeah,
um, yeah, I mean, it's one that I kind of want to be good. It's like, hey, maybe if he's got a sword upgrade, and then now suddenly he's speed 4 with +1 damage on that sword weapon, and he's got extra defense, and but no, you're going through too many hoops there, I think.
yeah,
And if he's dead at any point for any reason, this is suddenly just a dead card, and you don't like that. Um,
yeah,
I think, and just to go back to thieving grapple, like you're right, it's definitely too restrictive, and it only goes on a really bad fighter, which is not good. If we ever get a speed package again, which I don't think we will because it's problematic, But if we did, this is an interesting one if you're in a speed package, because then you're like, well, it gives me some benefit just from moving.
Mm.
But I doubt we'll ever be living in that world again. So uh, put that one in the back of the cupboard and maybe just dust it off if we end up back in that play space, which I would be shocked.
Yeah.
I guess while we're on the topic of things that you probably don't take because of restrictions and just not being good enough, I think we don't even really need to talk about it other than to just say that it's here. Legendary Looter is bad. This is
Yeah.
restricted to black powder or a minion. It gives your fighter an action where they can choose a friendly fighter, discard a swag counter, and then give them an upgrade for free. But then the fighter who took this action gets a charge token. Yikes.
Yeah. Pretty rough. I tried thinking of ways that this might. I'm like, oh, this is a way to discard a swag counter that doesn't involve a shot. So like maybe this is a backdoor way of getting inspired. I'm like, well, you still have to find that second swag counter somewhere.
Yeah.
Uh, I I mean, I could be wrong. There could be like a weird control build, but even this, even like the efficiency on this, that first time you discard a swag counter to get a free upgrade, that's just paying back the glory that you spent on this legendary looter upgrade. So
Yeah.
you have to use it more than once before you get a good return on your investment, which means that and because it gives you a charge token,
It has
means
to
you're
be
only
in two
using once per
separate
round.
rounds.
So the earliest this would like give you a good return on investment is the second round, at which point you spent 2 actions on this.
It feels so bad.
And then I come back around to, you are right, Phil. It's bad. Don't do it.
It feels like on initial take, you're like, ooh, free upgrade. And then you're like, nah, it's not really free. You're spending glory for an upgrade to play another upgrade. Like it doesn't just play the one you were going to play, with this instead of playing this. Just,
yeah.
So that leaves us with a few that I don't know. I mean, like, are there any good upgrades in here beyond the grease? Like,
I mean, I think the short answer is not really.
Yeah, they all feel pretty rough.
There's more weird gun ones, like one that lets him kind of scatter and do some blast damage on people, which is really circumstantially helpful for those fighters that are real hard, but it's unreliable. There's one that gives you range at the cost of dice. There's one that lets you shoot Scavenge Shot, lets you shoot without discarding swag counters, which seems okay, but you have to be on a feature token that is not in your territory, and it ends up dealing a damage to you, which feels pretty rough as well. That one I see maybe like if you really leaned into the gun thing and you were trying to turret from a spot.
Yeah,
but damaging yourself is a pretty steep cost,
especially when your life total is the thing that's making you such a durable fighter. Like if he was 2 block all the time or something, then it'd be like, oh, maybe you can give up some of that health. But no, I think you need every point of health. Try and make it 3 attacks to kill him or something.
Yeah.
I think it's worth talking about on More Shot just because it's one that it's kind of confused me, and I think it's worth just mentioning. So the way this actually works, it's a reaction. After you make the Grunderbuss attack, you do the thing twice. So you scatter from the target's hex and deal 1 damage to any fighter in the end hex of the scatter, so somebody adjacent, that has not already been dealt damage by this reaction. So for the targeting of this, it's figuring out the scatter after you push, right? Because the push is still part of the attack action.
Oh yeah, sure. That's a good point. I didn't even think about that.
So
you could knock somebody back into a spot that is better for you to trigger this.
Yeah, I mean, I still don't think it's great, but I mean, you do have to kind of remember that this could mean drive back and then scatter against, like, you got a 33% chance of hitting who you want because you're going to take the smash scatter option to try and, because it's the most reliable. It's some extra damage. I think if it was just like roll one dice and on smash deal one damage to all adjacent enemy fighters, like yeah, maybe
Yeah.
that starts to feel
Yeah.
okay because that's a lot of extra damage if you can get them clumped up. But
Yeah.
with the scatter, I don't see it too much.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, I guess cache
Again, I
compass.
think,
Oh, sorry.
well,
Go
I was
ahead.
going to say with the more shot, like there's maybe if you're going in on I'm going to shoot the gun a lot of times, because like you shoot and then you shoot again with quick shot or fast shot or whatever.
Yeah,
Um, Hasty Shot is what it's called.
get you the
It's
reaction
it's a
multiple
little bit of
times.
a memey build, but you were talking about Cache Compass and Liberated Map. I feel like two that should go together.
They sure do, and I think that they're maybe the only other two that I would even consider taking out of here. So Cash Compass, it's a reaction. It has to go on a minion, so you're putting this on one of the Noblars. Um, After the fighter's activation, you can push them up to 2 hexes towards the nearest feature token. Now, the interesting thing is that you could plan to have the nearest feature token be where you want to be able to push your fighter. I think there's
Mm-hmm.
some interesting play patterns there. And then at the end of the action phase, if the fighter is on a feature token and is not in your territory, and that's sort of the killer there, you do get one swag counter and you inspire the fighter.
Mm.
I think if Cash Compass just said if you were holding a feature token at the end of the round with this fighter, you got to get a swag counter and inspire them, this could be really nice because you could hang back in your territory and pick up some extra swag that way. The fact that it has to not be in your territory makes this feel a bit more rough, but a free push after every activation doesn't feel terrible. What do you think?
Right. It seems all right to me. It's going on a minion, unfortunately, so it's going
Yep.
on your two worst guys. What I want to see in some rivals game somewhere is that this and the liberated map on the same fighter. So
Oh man.
liberated map is action if this fighter is in an edge hex and has no move tokens. Place this fighter in an empty edge hex and give this fighter one move token. And then has the same thing at the end of the action phase. If this fighter is on a feature token that is not in your territory, gain one swag counter and this fighter is inspired. So I'd like to imagine your last activation, you got both these upgrades on one, on pegs. Pegs teleports to the back, wanders onto a feature token, and picks up 2 swag counters, becomes inspired.
It'd be quite the play.
Because he'd have to react. It's crazy, but it's the kind of play that like feels hilarious. And
Yeah.
maybe I don't know. Maybe it is there in the control build. I don't think it is, but maybe.
I don't think so. I think the thing that makes me most interested in these is being able to potentially stack extra swag counters and inspire your minions without them having to make attacks. But
Yeah.
because they forced it to be holding in enemy territory, well, technically it could be in no one's territory, but that's not much better than having to be in enemy territory.
Yeah.
It just feels like a lot to ask for those worst fighters in the warband.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think the vibe that we're both putting off here is that the upgrades are the weakest part of this warband.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely you take the grease because an always on guard upgrade is very strong. I mean, you can just turn mange into Glisette. Like that
Yep.
is good. That is
Yeah.
objectively good. He doesn't have range 2 attacks, but like it doesn't hardly matter. That's still solid. And if you can get him inspired, he's even better. So outside of those, I just don't see taking many of these unless, like you said, you go in the like really memey sort of like, I'm gonna just shoot the gun as many times as I can and hopefully that pays off. And like, admittedly, there might be enough support down the line for like a really hard ranged game style. I just don't see why you would do it with this warband if there is that support in like the generic cards, because it's like there are much better range fighters.
Yeah. Yep.
Since we talked about everything else except for pointy bits, I think we might as well just say what this is, just so people know this is the last upgrade. It's pointy bits. It goes on black powder or a minion, and it does different things for depending on who has them, which is actually, I think, another interesting way to restrict a card. So if you give it to a minion, their range 1 attack action has Grievous. Now, interesting thing to note is that the only minion with a range 1 attack action base is Pegs. So, yikes. But if you give it to Black Powder, he gets a reaction where during his Grunderbuss attack action, after the declare attack action step, you can choose to give the attack cleave and -1 dice.
I hopped on the odds calculator, the warband odds calculator. This almost always makes your attack less accurate.
Yeah, I I definitely think I said earlier in the episode that I think I would almost always prefer more dice than ensnare, and I think that is doubly better, or doubly the case with cleave. There are so few fighters with multiple defense dice with blocks that gaining cleave and losing 1 dice is going to almost always be a step backwards.
Yeah. My pushback is there's maybe enough guard or like fighters that go on guard that that cleave has that relevancy, but 100% it's you had to have quite a few defense dice before you started getting incremental gains on this, which all adds up to probably don't take this upgrade.
Yeah, probably not. I mean, I think, like we said, I think you're mostly leaving these at home, unless you're doing something with the shooting, or maybe that map and compass can kind of work out for you. But pretty much you've got Tragoth Grease and then some playable ploys and upgrade or objectives. So that's all the cards. We hit them all, ran them all down. It's not always what we do, but I think it felt appropriate here, given how different these guys are. I don't know. What are your overall thoughts? Where would you like to start to? And I know we've kind of talked through some of this already, but where would you like to see building for this warband going? Outside of a rivals format, and obviously we can kind of report back after we get a few more games. But
yeah, I really like the idea of finding a way to make this control-y, where you find ways to gain things. I like that. Feels like where light fingered could really be leveraged, because I remember some of those early games we were playing against a control Stormcast or something. You're like, they're not getting much glory. Like the Stormcast aren't building on much glory, but neither am I. But if I can get there with just 1 or 2 upgrades, like that might be enough to like turn the tide. And here, maybe you can make that happen. We're like, guess what? You won't even get those. So I know not everybody likes that play style, and these have a lot of cards that kind of force you. Even if you're going to try to do it, you're going to have to probably go into enemy territory at least a little bit to make it happen. But that is the place that I would first try to play around making a deck and see what I could come up with. Just to really try to lean into like how good is light fingered, how much mileage can I get out of this guy, and it might just be too hard having 5 little fighters. I'm not sure, but we'll see.
Yeah, kind of in the same headspace. I think control could be really fun with these guys. I think if you want to go that route, I think maybe you really double down. You take as many enemy push options as you can, and then, maybe you take acidic strike. Acidic strike's illegal, right?
Yes, okay. It was in the Silent Menace.
Yes, so you could take acidic strike, and then whatever the other one is, the narrowing passage or whatever.
Yeah,
I mean, you could really lean into just restricting what your opponent is able to do, and then maybe run highway. What is it? Highway robbery? I haven't played it. Daylight robbery. Either way, you're stealing stuff. Take people's upgrades. Take people's glory. Be that jerk who's just like, I'm not gonna let you do hardly anything, and then have a giant ogre standing in there, and they'll have to figure out how to deal with him without much upgrade help or glory. Uh, I think that could be interesting. I don't know how good it would be, but I think it's worth trying. Your opponent might just get upset with you, though. So I guess uh, maybe if you're going to try this out in your local play group, maybe discuss first and be like, so this is what I'm doing. Are you going to
Yeah.
enjoy playing this? Um, and then I think if I were to like take a guess as to maybe the most optimal way to play these guys, since they do seem to have this aggro lens to them, is that maybe you do lean into uh, black powder and you kind of run him a little bit like Malog, and you just sort of stack stuff on him, try and work to get some early glory to build up the little guys to make them into like missiles, and then um, just try and smash as much as you can as you work your way forwards. I don't know if that is going to work though. I mean, you've got some really poor fighters and you don't have the action economy that Malog or Hrothgorn have. Um,
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, it's nice to have that extra range. Like I think there's something there where, commanding stride and some other things like that, you can kind of surf around. He doesn't have the
mhm.
durability, so you're gonna have to try to use that range to your advantage. But that combined with some of the movement tricks you can use on the companions, it might be something there. So I don't know.
Yeah,
Tough to say.
tough to say. I'm excited to try them though. I feel like he's just in such a weird space. Maybe weird will translate to just bad space, but I think there's something here. I mean, they're at least as durable as Seraphon, and I've had plenty of games where I hardly lose any of them. Um, so I don't know, but
All part of the plan.
all part of the plan. But maybe that's just because I get lucky. I don't know. When we tried these guys out for rivals, I got speed rolled hard. Um, Gorlock was dead at the first activation of round 2, so uh, maybe not, but we'll see. I'm definitely gonna play him for a little while, and we will probably have another episode to talk more about these guys once we have some more experience. Um, and with that, is there anything else that you wanted to mention about this warband before we sign off?
Yes, I really like their warband symbol. It's awesome. The
It is good.
the
It's a good
whalebone
one.
jaw. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So
It
or shark jaw. What is that? Shark jaw. I guess.
Yeah, it looks like a shark jaw. It also just looks a lot like the so the ogre maw tribes have like, I don't remember exactly what he's called, but he's like some sort of deity figure that's like the great maw or whatever, and they like ride like on their flagpoles or whatever. They just have these big iron jaws or whatever. It kind of looks like that too, so it's a nice tie-in in that way as well. Sort of leaning into the AOS side, and then also like, hey, he's a pirate, so it's a shark jaw. It's cool. But yeah, I think there's a lot of flavor here, if nothing else.
Yeah.
So definitely a fun one just from that perspective. And I guess if
Yeah.
you're a fan of pirates, these are your guys. So I think that just about does it for talking about the sort of hot takes for Gorlock Black Powder. If you'd like to get in touch with us to talk any of your thoughts or let us know what you think we got wrong in our initial takes, you can reach us at WTHcast on Twitter or whatthehexcast@gmail.com. If you'd like to check out any of our other episodes or keeping an eye out for any future coverage, if you're really interested on future coverage for Black Powder, you can always go to check the stuff out at themortalrealms.com. We've got all of our episodes up there, as well as all of the other episodes for all the other shows in our podcast network. Coming up next, it will be some other coverage, most likely, of the new releases. We've got a new FAR, we've got a new Rivals deck in Illusory Might, so I'm sure it'll be one of those things, unless we get yet another bombshell drop of some sort. I wouldn't expect to at this point, though.
I want to talk Illusory Might, so
Cool.
keep an eye out there.
Let's do that.
That's
one.
my vote.
I think that is
All right.
a good choice because right now rivals, like the actual rivals decks as they're sort of purported to exist, you just have Silent Menace, and that's not enough diversity to try and run
Yeah.
just rivals. So interesting space. I think rivals continues to get more interesting as we release more cards. So yeah, keep an eye
Definitely.
out for that one.
While we got folks here, I wanted to make one last shout out. This is the last time we'll mention on the podcast. We do still have that survey out. I'm going to close it up at the end
Yeah.
of January. So if you have already filled it out, many thanks. It's gotten us some really great information, and you gave us a gift of your time, and I appreciate that. If you haven't had the chance to do so yet, by the time you hear this, it'll be about 1 week left to do it. Hop on. It takes 3 or 4 minutes, and we really value that feedback that you can give us. So thanks in advance for doing that.
Yeah, definitely. It's greatly appreciated. Helps us provide a more tailored show experience. Letting if there's something you want to hear, the only way we're going to know about it is if you let us know. So definitely appreciate it.
Links in the show notes, and I'll try and throw it up in the groups just the one time. I didn't want to spam the groups, so we'll do one round of those. So. Yeah.
All right. And for your recommended listening today, what do we got, Davy?
Oh, yeah. This one I was excited for. This is Hoist That Rag by Tom Waits off of Real Gone. And this is exactly what I think a drunken pirate ogre would sound like if he was singing a song. So.
Perfect. All right. For What the Hex, I've been Phil.
And I've been Davy. We're live. Coming to you live.
I think we're good then.
Do it. Do it, you coward.
Man, I totally messed this up. I should really start with who I am and who you are. And
that's the last one you hosted. We did that. I managed to splice it back together.
Yeah. Okay. I'll just hard cut. We'll
take
start
from
over.
the top.
Yep.
All right.